Good morning, everyone. I see some very familiar faces and friends. My name is Sally Cross, and I've lived on the island for about 20 years, and I just love it. I also am a landscape designer. I went back to college and did 2 years of landscape design, and I've worked the past 20 years doing this. And it's my pleasure to be with you this morning to share a little bit about rock gardening. Now, what conjures up in your mind when you hear the word rock garden? I think back to the old-fashioned rock gardens of the small rocks and the heathers and the heaths and the alpine plants. But here in the Northwest, we have a wonderful opportunity to use some very colorful, bright rocks that can really add a lot to the garden. So why a rock garden? So a rock garden can be used to hide a problem area that you have in your yard. Often it's used to stabilize a slope or turn an awkward slope into an attractive part of the landscape. It can be a solution for an area where you've got poor soil and little will grow there. So a rock garden can also offer a textural element to the design. A focal point in the landscape to catch the eye, and even with those large rocks, if you get the flat rocks, you can use them to sit on. So there's a lot of things that you need to consider when you're thinking of a rock garden. Rocks can be costly. Does the site that you've chosen, does it need excavating? You need to think about the placement of the rocks and the size of the rocks used. You want to choose the right color and shape of rocks. Do they fit in with the other landscape, the hardscapes that you have? You might have, those preformed concrete walls. You might have that, and you might have a pathway which might be brick. You want the rocks to fit in with what you already have as hardscapes. You want a good scale too. If the rocks are too big, they can be overpowering. If they're too small, they can get lost. Are they pleasing to the eye? And this is really more of a personal choice. You can have rounded rocks, you can have rugged rocks, you can have big boulders, you can have small rocks. And then the contour of the land. Is it flat? Is it hilly? Is it undulating, or is it steep? And you can also create an area for a rock garden by, if you've got old rocks, rubble, old stones, you can pile them up. If you've got some turf, you can turn the turf upside down, fill it in with some good soil, and create an undulating area in your yard. Is it a sunny spot or is it a shady spot? Because that will determine what plants you might use. How easy is it to weed? How easy might it be to water? With a rock garden, if you put too much water on it at one time, you'll have a runoff. So you have to be very careful with that. And then as your rock garden becomes established, as the plants are established, it just becomes easier to weed. You want to spend a lot of time carefully planning this and maybe draw it out as a rough design. So where do you purchase the rocks? Well, Morrison's in Port Orchard is a great place to go. You can go and you can just walk around and see what they have. Walrath is in Gig Harbor. There's a rock center up in Issaquah called Marinacos. It's probably the best rock source in this area. It's a long way to go and a long way for them to deliver it. You can also go to Craigslist. You know, sometimes there are people that have rocks and stones that they don't want to use anymore, free to the taking. You could go rock hounding. That's kind of fun. I've done it. And you can get all kinds of different colors and shapes. In most places, will let you pick out the rocks for yourself. They'll give you a piece of tape. You go around, you put your tape on the rocks that you want, and then they'll deliver them. delivery, when you go to purchase the rocks, you need to make sure you ask them, would they place them? Very often they'll just deliver them to your home and they'll leave them in the driveway. Then you're going to need to find somebody else that can place those rocks for you. And there are many people that have the equipment to do that are very good with rocks. And they just look at the rock and they say, okay, that rock should go there. That rock should go there. Do any of you have rock gardens? So the grouping of rocks, this is also very important. When placing large rocks and boulders, it's crucial that you know ahead of time where they will be placed. That will save you money. Placing them can be expensive. They will look more natural and pleasing if the larger ones are partially buried in the soil. And you can see here, these are big boulders. And you can see this one, a quarter of it is buried in the soil. A half of this one is buried in the soil, and about a third of this one is buried in the soil. That would it just gives a more pleasing, natural look. Rocks can be boulder type. They can be rugged with sharp edges, distinct edges, flat or rounded. It's really just a matter of your choice. So you want some random groupings, varying in size, and you can even add pebbles or shale or drain rock for added interest. And I have some slides later on that will show how they have done that. When choosing a larger rock, you need to have a lighter color hue. That way it will blend in better and you will see the shape of the rock better. So, ideas that you might want to incorporate into the rock garden. You might want to have steps that go through it so your rock gardens are on either side. You might want to include a dry riverbed. You can create a small rock garden at a downspout. You might want to add a fire pit, a place to sit. You can use rocks as a border to a flower bed or a pond. And you can also create a nice entryway into your home in the driveway, incorporating the address on the rocks. Again, it's expensive to do that, to get them to put the numbers on the rocks, but it does look very effective. So how do you make a rock garden attractive? Plants. We all love plants, don't we? So when choosing plants, you want a variety. It's best to choose 3 or 5 of the same plant. I'm not saying this right. You need to choose 3 to 5 different varieties of plants that you scatter throughout your rock garden. This pulls it all together so your eye is not darting from one to another to another. Then you can embellish it with color in different places to catch the eye. I like to use a shrub and then a grass and a perennial, maybe 2 shrubs, 2 grasses, and a couple of perennials. And you have to remember, how is this going to look throughout the season? You want a good balance of deciduous and evergreen plants. So you want to keep in mind the general design principles of scale, color schemes, and you want it all to blend and be interesting. So let's talk about plants. And I've listed on your handout several plants. You know, the dwarf barberries, they're great. Different colors, they come in deep reds and yellows, very attractive. Your heaths and heathers, junipers. And this is a shore juniper down here. It's not very clear. And this is, you probably recognize the top one. Now, when using junipers, you have to be careful because they can have a spread of 6 to 8 feet. But if you had an area in your rock garden, you just wanted to have a green spot, that would be a great plant to use. Then we go to the dwarf mugo pines, which is this one here. The rhododendron impeditum, that's a small rhodie that has small flowers and small purple flowers and small leaves. It's very attractive. The Lithodora, the problem with Lithodora is it's got these beautiful bright blue flowers, but it can get woody as it gets old. Picea abies, little gem, which is a dwarf bird's nest spruce, which is this one right here. Sarcococca humilis, which is a low-growing sarcococca. It gets about a foot to a foot and a half tall with a spread of about 2 feet. That's a great woodland garden plant for a rock garden, and it loves shade. Tsuga canadensis, little Joe, that's an arborvitae, small one. Weigela maimoniae is a great plant. It's variegated, it's got purple flowers. Again, it stays very small. Chamaecyparis obtusa, there are many dwarf varieties. This is your Hinoki cypress. This is a golden one. Very attractive. You want to be careful with these because deer do like them. This is a boxwood, and this boxwood has a really irregular growth, as you can see. You've got stems pointing in every direction. It's a great boxwood. Just to give a little interest, here we have a variegated one of the same variety. There's a plant, Cistus Mickey, which is variegated again, a great rock garden. Hydrangeas, they've come out with many small varieties now of hydrangeas that would fit nicely. There's the Chamaecyparis mops. This is one of my favorite plants. It just adds so much interest. The growth pattern is really pleasing. And in the wintertime, you know, here in the Northwest, we get such gray days. If you have a little yellow plants in your landscape, it just brightens it up. There are the nandinas. There's several different varieties of nandinas that get to be about 2 feet, 2.5 feet. This is a great little plant. It's a euonymus butterscotch. Again, it's variegated. It's got some yellow foliage in it, and it gets only about 1 foot tall. Then you have your Virginias. We're going on now to herbaceous perennials. Bellis is a little daisy, ground cover daisy, very attractive. These begonias are, it's funny because I never used to like this plant, and now I love it. It's got such nice texture, it's different, the leaves are big, and it works as a really nice filler. Geranium Roseanne. This is a great geranium, a great perennial. It blooms all the way from May through to October. Don't have to do anything to it. It will spread about 3 feet. Beautiful purple flowers. You've got candy tuft, saxifragus, sedums. There's all kinds of different varieties of sedums. The iris, lobelia, penstemon, black-eyed Susan, the geums, scabiosa, and the campanulas, and of course, we all know the hostas. So the annuals, you know, many of the annuals you can use. I'm not going to go through all of these, but I will show you this one. This one is called a creeping zinnia. It blooms, has these tiny yellow flowers on it. It will get about 6 inches up and will spread about 1 foot. It's always covered in these little yellow flowers, very attractive.
What was that called?
Creeping zinnia. Zinnia. Z-I-N-N-I-A. And then your bulbs. bulbs are a great spring addition. And I just love that Tate-to-Tate daffodil. It gets up about, oh, maybe 9 inches to a foot, and the wind doesn't blow it over like what often happens with the taller varieties. And then you've got your fillers. This is Euonymus Emerald Gaiety, again variegated. This is Euonymus cuensis. Now these two plants will actually climb over your rocks. Great fillers. You have the beach strawberry. There's one called Pink Panda, which has pink flowers on it. You've got your sedums, you've got all your caryxes. There's a frosty curls, which has a kind of a blue-gray foliage. You've got your Japanese forest grass. Again, this is one of my favorites. That's a great plant to put behind a rock because it will flop over the rock. Mondo grass. And don't forget your herbs. There's thyme, lots of different types of thyme. One of my favorites is golden curly marjoram. It's a golden leafed, very tiny leaf, but all the leaves are curled on it, very attractive. And of course, rosemary. Then we have all of the ajugas. Again, great ground covers. This is, again, one of my favorites, Catlin's Giant. It's bigger than most of them. You have all your sedges, your moss. And then this is another grass, which is great for the shady area, Carex Everillo Evergold. So there are just many, many plants that you can use for your rock garden. So now I'm going to take you through a couple of projects where we have used rocks. Oh, that's your heuchera. So this job site is on the waterfront. It's actually in the downtown Gig Harbor, in the Gig Harbor Bay area. And this is what we started with, and this continues all the way up to the house at the top. So I put together a rough plan, and you can see the rocks here, the shaded areas. This was probably my most challenging job I've ever done. So this is what we did. As you can see, the property drops right off from the patio here. So I built a wall going along the top, and I left about 3 feet so that they can plant to soften it, so that they have foliage between the patio and the rocks. And then, as you can see, they're randomly placed. They had difficulty. They couldn't place all the rocks where I wanted them because it's so steep. They were afraid they would tip up their machine. But as you can see here, I have sketched out a couple of ideas here. Here, the rocks are basically placed the same distance apart. And you've got about 36 feet from here to here. And it looks all right. I mean, it can be pleasing depending on what you put in there. But this is, I think, in my opinion, just a little bit more pleasing. I've got groups of 3 here, 3 here, 3 up here. I've got 5 over here. I've got 2, 2, 2s, and then the 1s. It just adds another dimension of interest to your plan. And then this is just a very simple idea. It would be a very narrow area. Again, I've put 3 rocks, 5 rocks, 2 rocks, and 3 rocks. And then you can put, if your landscape, if it would look right, you can put a couple of trees or taller plants behind, or actually in the design itself. But you want to be careful that you do not cover the rocks with your plants, because you want to be able to see them. So this is showing the steepness of what we were dealing with. And these are big rocks. That's down by the waterfront. And you can put rocks along the shoreline. And this is it finished, and they're planting it. Unfortunately, the plants are really small. at this point. This all had to be native planting, which was a real challenge. It's very hard to find anything that's native which is large. They just come in the 4-inch or the 1-gallon pot. So this is it cleaned up and finished. And it's hard to see where the larger plants are. Here we've got some shrubs, which you can hardly see, again, because they're small. But you get the general idea of how the rocks were placed and how we created planting areas. Then this is a water feature. You might want to add a water feature to your rock garden. This is one of those rocks that has the hole drilled in it and the water just spills out. And you can see that we've used different sized rocks here. We've used some flat ones, we've used some boulders, and we've used some smaller ones to kind of fill in. This is it when it was finished and planted. Then this is another project we worked on, and as you can see, we've put rocks in here. We've got a couple of single rocks, we've got a double rock, we've got a grouping of 3 here, 2 here, and then 3 or 4 over on the side. And here we use some pebbles to just to outline it so that the soil wouldn't spill onto the pathway. I'm just going to run through these quickly. Here's a pathway going to the back. And then this is the garden finished and planted a year on. You see, you can still see the rocks. But look how pretty that is with the yellow foliage, how it makes everything look bright, cheerful. This garden will be on the Gig Harbor Garden Tour next year. And the back garden is just as beautiful as the front garden. Only because my client's a great gardener. Okay, this is another idea to stop the gravel from the driveway going into the planting beds. As you can see, we use larger rocks to surround the circular driveway, and we use them along all the planting areas. This is steps that go up to a fire pit. But you can see they have used, they're trying to create more of a sort of a rock garden type planting with the small plants and the grasses that they planted on either side. So, whose garden is this?
Oh my God. I think I recognize that one.
This is Deborah's garden. Here, we put rocks to kind of sort of add interest and sort of soften the path a little on the curbs. And this is a job to be done. But you can see how they've placed the rocks to create a bed, a planting area. This is, again, we've used rocks smaller rocks to separate the grass from the planting bed. So, this is not a rock garden.
That must be in front of my house.
No, that's actually going down into Doreen's driveway. So this is really pleasing. They've used large rocks here, as you can see, the boulder type rocks. And they've used the sedums, the larger sedums. They've got a barberry there and a mugo pine. This is another one, and I think this is at Bellevue Botanical Gardens. You can see again, they've used large rocks here and large rocks on this side. They've also used larger conifers to keep the scale right. But if you also notice, through here, they have a swale of perennials. Very attractive. This shows how when you put water over rocks, how it changes the color of the rocks. Here they've used the white rocks. Again, it's the water feature with the pebbles and smaller bulbs planted all around it. So this is at McAuliffe's up in Snohomish. Now this is very simple. It's quite a large area. It's a Zen garden. Here they have one tall rock. Here they have a dumpy rock with moss all around it. And here they have a rock that's buried in the ground with moss growing over it. And then they have a barberry back there. A very simple and yet pleasing spot. Okay, this is in front of Walrath's. Again, it's sort of a rustic, northwesty type rock garden using large conifers. This is at Rosedale Gardens. This is an idea that I thought was very attractive. It gives you a focal point within the rocks. The colorful pots add color year-round. And you can plant all kinds of different shrubs in there. I don't think they've got very much planted, but I thought the color of those pots was really attractive. So you might know where this is. This is the entrance to the cemetery. This is what not to do. Okay, this says the statement, don't park beyond these rocks. I mean, you definitely get that message. But they've put the rocks just sitting on the grass. Now, had they buried those rocks, had they buried this one, maybe up to this point, it would just look more pleasing. I hope there's no one here that placed those rocks. So this is an idea that someone has used. You can see there's a concrete wall here, and you can't see it very well, but it's got cracks in it. So what they've done, they've piled up smaller rocks, created little planting spaces, and filled it in with flowers and plants. This I thought is pleasing. I like what they've used here. They've used the rounder boulders and smaller plants, but I like the combination of the gray, blue, I think this is lavender here, along with the purple. Very attractive. This again, they've used smaller rocks, but you can see they've planted thrift, and they've planted, these are herbs that they've got in here. Very simple. This is a nice idea where, again, they've used the blue-green foliage of the grasses. They've used the white rocks and with just splashes of yellow, which brings it all together. This one is also, I think this one's very different. They've used sort of more jagged rocks in here with, this is your Japanese forest grass. You have a rhododendron here, and you have a maple in the back. And they've used a piece of art to catch your eye. This is, I think, a more traditional kind of mountain rock garden. A lot of the rocks are covered over. It's become well established. You can see there's a rock back in here. But they've got nice combination of flowers in here. This is just a collection of rocks. Here they've used a barrel rather than a pot. This is another collection where they have upturned a broken pot, and they've got sedum spilling out of it. You can see in this one they've used different types of rocks, different colors. And this one's got some moss growing on it. Now this again is what not to do. This is in Gig Harbor, and as you can see, it's planted, but it's mostly perennial. So in the winter time, it's bare. Had they put in a couple of evergreen shrubs in here, it would just look more attractive. So this, when I first saw this, I thought, I'm not sure I like that. But then I looked closer, and I noticed that, the rocks down here are buried. These are probably more set on the ground. But what I liked about this is the rocks complement the house, the style of the house. And they've used, this must be in the south somewhere because you can tell by the plants they've used, but they've got bursts of color. There's yellow here, there's red here. This is the same plant, just a different color. But I thought that was, for what it is, it's very, very architecturally pleasing. This shows a pathway, a gravel pathway running through a rock garden. Again, they put some upright rocks in here, some jagged lower rocks, and again, it's planted. This is springtime, so you've got your bulbs, and I think there's some heathers in there, and heucheras. And again, you've got a few conifers dotted around. Here, they've used flat rocks. You have a waterfall trickling down. Flat rocks with low-growing perennials and grasses and heathers. So this one, they've used a lot of white rocks here. But what I like about this is they've used, again, the yellow foliage. So you have that blend of green, white, and yellow, which is simple, but very pleasing. So here they've used boulder-type rocks. You've got your barberries in there. You've got your darker foliage, light-colored rocks, and they've put quite a few rocks in there. This is pleasing too. They've used the more gravel type in here along with the rocks. This is a light color gravel, and over on the far side they've got the dark gravel, which adds a contrast. This, they've used upright rocks again. These are all jagged rocks. And again, they've used a red-leafed shrub just to catch the eye. This again is I think a more well-established rock garden. It's been there for a while. You can tell because the plants are beginning to climb over the rocks. Not quite sure why I put this one in there, except you've got rocks. And it was colorful. So this is a nice idea where they've taken the slope. You've got steps going up the slope, but they've also put rocks in here, rocks along the bottom to separate the grass from the planting area. They put some bigger trees in here, and then some low-growing shrubs and ground covers. I think that would look pleasing all year. This is just an extension of that. Here you've got your begonias. This is a geranium here, and then you've got the tall grasses in the back. This just shows the moss, how it can cover the pathway, how it can cover the rocks, and you've got here a collection of those tall columnar water feature rocks. So this is another one where, again, it's more subdued. Again, they've used rounded rocks. This is your heucheras, your sedums. I think that's a mop head, a Chamaecyparis mop at the top there. If you have a waterfall, it's nice to put something that kind of flops over where the water comes out. It can either be a mop head, or the Japanese maples do a great job of that. This one is just a very small area where they've used, again, a waterfall, a rock for a waterfall, and they just put one or two rocks in here with gravel. And the pathway matches the wall, that wall of the house here, and it also matches the color of the rocks. This shows, I wanted to show this one because it shows the dramatic effect of the black mondo grass. People either like the mondo grass or they don't. But here you have a very vivid contrast with the black, the white rocks, and then the light greener foliage. This is one that you could put if you have an area where your grass is not growing very well and the soil is really compacted. You could create a rock garden. Here they've used mostly succulents, so it's very low growing, but just a nice feature. This one I like. They've used large rocks, but they've grouped them all together. You've got 6 rocks in here, again with low growing perennials. And someone put a pot there. They hadn't planted it yet. This is nice again. You've got the white rocks along with, I like the way they put these 3 golden conifers down here against the white daisies and then the green grass. Very effective. And this one is probably more like this here, where they've put boulders, the steps going up again. You can see this is mostly, they've got grasses in here, they've got conifers set back, but most of it appears to be covered with perennials. Again, another water feature, different styled rocks. And then this one, I really like this one. They've sort of made a line of rocks and they've sort of planted in between the rocks with grasses. Again, they've got, looks like heather. I think it's very attractive. This is your first rock garden, isn't it? So that's all I have for you. Do you have any questions? Yes.
Why do landscapers use odd numbers like 1, 3, 5, or 7?
Because it's generally more pleasing. If you use 2s and 4s, it gives a more formal feel to it. I mean, you can use 2, but it does give a more formal feel to it. If you use 3, 5 odd numbers, it just seems to soften the design. So that's why. Another question.
I got a comment. I used to pick rock out of a river between the Elm and Roslyn.
Yes.
There's a campground up there, and the rock is all river rock. It's come down, a lot of it out of Canada, you know, during the glaciated period. And there were different colors, but I don't think you can pick those rocks anymore because it's public land. If you pick rocks off any public land, you better be careful because
That's good to know.
it may be illegal, so you better check before you get rocks out of public land.
Right. That's a very good point. Yes, you had a question.
I do. And I don't know, because I can't hear all that well, sometimes if you had covered this, but do you put any type of a weed protective fabric down before you actually do for the small petals?
Right. You know, I don't. And my reason is weeds will still grow. And what the roots will grasp the landscape fabric if they're left there. And it makes it much harder to pull those weeds. Mm-hmm. Yes, Deborah.
If you have an area where you have what you would call little round petals, sometimes people use them as walkways or
Right.
around. You want to get rid of them because all the fur needles touch them all the time. So other than just shoveling it out by hand, I mean, even if you do shovel it out by hand, where can you
Well, you could reuse them. I mean, you could use them as a base for a rock garden, where you place your rocks on them, or you could actually mound them and create a hill type area, and put a couple of bigger rocks in there, and fill it in with ground cover.
It's a walkway area right now. You're walking along to the little shed in the back. I'm just, 10 years of pulling out fir needles is wearing me out. So I'm going to get rid of that rock.
Well, the other place you could put them is along your fence line. Put them back behind
Okay.
where you can't see them.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe well.
Yes.
I have rather large areas of iris, and we're 6 years old, and now the grass from the neighbor's lawns has embedded itself in the iris. So other than, all I can see is labor to dig them out and pull the grass out. Is there any other way to do it? It's not so.
Not, I'm afraid, not really. No.
Is there a question? So red lava rock, where and when did that?
What kind of rock?
Red lava rock?
Red lava rock. That's not very popular right now.
It's not?
No. You mean the small ones, right?
Yes.
This, yeah, yeah. I haven't seen that in a long time. There is a rockery place as you're going towards Port Orchard. You can see it from the freeway, and you have to drive past it, get off the freeway, and then drive back. Take the first right-hand turn and follow that road along. It will come to that rock selling nursery. You might try there, because I noticed they have some different. They have whites and they have greens and they have different colors. So you might try there.
Well, that wasn't easier, was it?
Yes.
So I'm a little bit of a newbie gardener, so
Uh-huh.
you guys already know it. But if you're planting where there's rocks, normally I would put like compost around it or fertilizer around it. But when there's rocks in there, is there a different way to feed the plants that in the pot?
Well, I think if I'm hearing you correctly, you have rocks and you have spaces between the rocks, and you would normally put compost in there, but are you asking what kind of soil to use?
Well, so I don't have a rock garden
Oh.
like this.
Okay.
Exactly. It's mostly dirt, so you just kind of
Right.
push it in. And
Right.
It's fine, but if I put rocks all the way across, she won't be able to dig her own plants to add fertilizer or their compost to it, like if I give a feed. So is there a different way to feed the plants through rocks?
To feed the plants through the rocks?
Yes.
The best way to feed them is by using Miracle-Gro.
Oh,
You can just shoot that on them.
really?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
I got a plant in the winter that's kind of neat. It's an orange bark maple,
Uh-huh.
and it has the red branches.
Mm-hmm.
The only problem, it gets kind of big, but it has a contrast in the winter. If you've got greens, you've got these red branches.
Right.
That's maple
Right.
and orange.
Uh-huh.
Even in the summer, it has kind of a yellowish orange
Right.
leaf, so it's a contrast plant,
Right.
but it does get big.
Right. Right. There is a dwarf variety. I can't remember the name right now, but you have to be careful when you see the word dwarf. It can be really misleading. There's a strawberry tree, and there's a dwarf strawberry tree. Well, the regular strawberry tree gets about 10 feet tall. The dwarf one gets about 8 feet tall. So beware. Any other questions? Well, go home and create. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally.
Okay.
Yeah, good.